Good morning, Bermuda, and welcome to the press conference for the Minister of Education, the Honorable Diallo Rabain, where we'll be talking about school return and in-person learning. Minister?
Thank you, Dr. Selassie. Good day and welcome, Bermuda. This morning, I wish to update the public regarding students returning to school, and we are pleased to announce that as of today, all preschools, primary, and 3 of 4 middle schools have returned to in-class learning and successfully have met the required clearance. We have seen Delwood, Whitney, and Sands Secondary Middle Schools, as well as Dame Marjorie Bean Hope Academy, return to in-class learning this week. Clearwater Middle School, Cedar Bridge, and Barkley will return to in-class learning after the break to complete the transition from remote education back to in-class learning for all public schools. This has been a challenging time for everyone, principals, teachers, parents, and students. But we extend our appreciation to each and every one of you for coming together to ensure that our young people can learn in a clean and safe environment. I want to be clear. This is not the time to stop practicing washing your hands, wearing your mask, or to start engaging in social behaviors that will cause us to be right back where we started. We want parents and students to continue to be careful during the upcoming midterm break. We want all of our students to return to school after the midterm break, ready, healthy, and eager to learn. The Ministry of Education will be undertaking mandatory testing of all students and staff before returning after the break. It will be imperative to ensure the safety of our school environment. A system is being set up to allow students and staff to sign up for time slots for testing on Friday, October 29th, Saturday, October 30th, and on a limited basis on Sunday, October 31st. With the assistance of the Ministry of Health and the MDL lab, we will be able to have testing done at Penrose Wharf, Bull's Head, P Road Post Office, Dockyard, St. Paul's Centennial Hall, and the Bermuda College. Parents and staff will receive instructions on how to sign up and pick their days and times for testing. To be clear, as with the pre-entry testing we did to return to in-class learning, a negative PCR test will be required to return to our schools after the midterm break. The saliva screening process will begin after the midterm break, and lateral flow testing is still being planned to be integrated as an addition to our screening processes. The Ministry of Education is currently working with the Ministry of Health on policies around the use of lateral flow testing. Discussions with private donors to assist with the supply of these tests are also well advanced. We are also working with the Ministry of Health to revise the quarantine policies to reduce the number of children sent home when a positive test is detected. While we do not wish to send any child home, we must ensure that our children are protected in school and outside of school. We will continue to assess and refine our policies as best to address the needs of our large volume of students island-wide, spread over 36 locations. Again, we are pleased that 32 of our 36 locations have returned to in-class learning. Students are settling back into a routine and are ready to learn. Bermuda, the Ministry of Health has shared that COVID numbers are down. We implore each of you to do your part to help stop the spread of the coronavirus. Continue to follow public health guidelines, wear a mask, practice good hand hygiene, and maintain physical distance. Parents, I ask that you continue to work with your children to ensure that they practice these guidelines as well. Together, we can tackle this pandemic and keep our children as safe as possible and in school. Before I go, I want to recognize the men and women of the Molecular Diagnostic Lab and their hard work and dedication to testing and providing us with the testing results that enable schools to return to in-class learning over the last 2.5 weeks. They have put in long hours and are often up all hours of the night to get the results back promptly. Additionally, I want to acknowledge the hard work and dedication of Bermuda's teachers. But today, I want to highlight the newly announced Bermuda Education Network's 2021 Outstanding Teacher of the Year, Mr. Dean Fogo. A veteran in education, Mr. Fogo is a shining example of sincere passion and inspiration to Bermuda's youth. We commend him on behalf of the Ministry of Education. I say thank you. Thank you, Bermuda, and be safe.
Thank you, Minister. We're going to now open the floor to questions. We have Sarah Lagan for the Royal Gazette. We're going to admit her in now. Sarah, are you there?
Thank you, Bermuda, and be safe.
Hi, Sarah, if you can lower your other audio. Thank you, and you are live.
Okay, Dana.
Good morning.
Good morning. How are you, Minister?
Fine, thank you.
Good. Just have a few questions for you. Could you give us an indication of how many students have tested positive to date?
Sarah, I cannot give that indication. The Department of Health will be the only ones that release that information. I do realize that it was released inadvertently by us on a previous occasion, but we will revert back to the policy of the Department of Health releasing those statistics.
Okay. You touched briefly on the antigen testing and discussions that are surrounding that. Can you build on that in any way and give any indication how soon these could be in use?
Providing that sort of testing on our school system is a process that we're working our way through. And as I said, in discussion with the Department of Health, we aim to have this in place as quickly as possible. I do not want to give an exact time frame at this particular moment, but it is something that we are discussing. And as I said, we have been discussing with private donors who actually have approached us about that, and so those discussions are well advanced as well. But it's a different process for us than it is for our private schools who are virtually dealing with one campus. We are dealing with 36 different locations, and putting something together that's going to work for all 36 locations is something that is of a critical importance to us. So I do want to put some assurance behind that it is something that is being worked on and being looked at. But we have literally been concentrating the last 2.5 weeks on how we can get our children tested, how we can get the screening process that was in place back up running, and what we were going to do after the break. And so those things have occupied the bulk of the time, but we have also been talking about how antigen testing can be introduced into the system as well. Okay, great.
Have you come to a decision as to how often you would like to see public students tested?
Well, and that is all part of the discussion and how it will integrate. As I mentioned on previous occasions, antigen testing we're not looking at this as a complete replacement of other things. We're looking at it as an enhancement. And so it will come down to how often the saliva screening will take place and how often antigen will take place. So those are the types of things that are being discussed now. And who knows, we may do it once a week, we may do it twice a week. Those are just discussions that are taking place.
Okay, sure. I'm not sure if I'm the only member of the media today, but you have been questioned repeatedly by the TV news about seeming double standards between, so there's a time delay basically between the testing and the return to school, and how that doesn't sit with requirements for the safe key. Can you speak to that today?
Sarah, what I can say is that we are doing our level best to make sure our students are tested. But I also want to remind the public that testing is one part of a entire group of things that need to be done. Our children are picking up this virus virtually almost 100% outside of our school system. Once they're in the school system, there are masks, there are social distancing requirements in place. There's hand washing requirements in place and the like. And as long as you're continuing to do that, you can mitigate the spread of this virus as much as possible. What we are concerned about is when they're not in school and they're not doing those things, and that's where they can be affected. So whether it's a day between a test, whether it's 2 days between a test, whether it's 3 days between a test, whether it's an hour after a test, if you're not doing those things to keep yourself safe, you're putting yourself at risk. So we always push for when they're not in school, where we don't have any sight of them, please exercise these things to keep ourselves safe. and we'll be okay as we move forward with that. But in terms of the testing, I can say that we have done a Herculean effort of testing all of our students before they came back. We have a screening process in place. We have rules and regulations in place, and we're doing all that we can within our school walls to ensure that our children are safe. We just need the public to do their part for when they're not within the school walls.
Thank you,
You can
Minister.
imagine,
Sarah, we have another agency here as well that's ready to ask questions. So we're going to finish with you for now. You can stand by if we do have more time, but we're going to allow Gary Forster Skelton into the conversation at this point, Minister.
Sure.
Good morning, Minister.
Good morning.
You're live.
Thank you very much. Let me just make my shit. There we are. Thank you, Minister. So yes, I will say Sarah did pick up on something that we had spoken about with the length of time between testing and return to school. You have said that all schools will be once more tested before they go back after the break. It should be noted that, as mentioned yesterday, we know of at least one school there was a 6-day gap between testing and return to school. Now the students who were the first to return to school, it's been 3 weeks. Is there a target? Because right now there's a lot of discussion of how regularly we'll do things, but what is the target? Are you looking at weekly testing or bi-weekly testing, twice a weekly testing? Can we get some solid goals on what you're trying to do here?
Gary, what we're trying to do is maintain the safety of our schools, and we will do everything in our power to do that. As I said, that we are in discussions with the Department of Health on what is the best policies moving forward. I think it would be, and we've already announced that we'll be doing saliva screening because as a parent with a child in the public school, you are required to sign up for consent, and that consent also articulated what that saliva screening process will look like. We will be introducing, as I said in the statement, we'll be introducing the screening process will start after the break. Coming back, and we will continue to look at our policies and revise them as we need to keep our schools safe. In terms of where we are with those discussions with the Department of Health, I think it's premature to say we're going one way versus another way because we're still discussing what is the best policies for that, and we will accept the advice of the Department of Health as we move forward.
Well, you did bring up there that I have children in public school, went through the testing. When it comes to trying to do regular testing for the public schools, are you trying to make it happen at the school? Because I can speak to the fact that some students were in a line for an hour waiting to get tested. So is this going to end up taking hours away from public school students and staff on the weekend, or are you going to try and put it in the schools?
Gary, the saliva screening, as it took place last school year, happened at the schools, and it will happen at the schools. The screening, the testing that we're talking about, what we call the pre-return testing, for example, what I said will happen next Friday, Saturday, and on a limited basis on Sunday. Obviously, won't be at the schools because school will be out. They'll be at the locations that I spoke of. What we did understand, and as we went forward, I believe you would have been part of the cohort that started the initial testing, the pre-entry testing. But as we went forward, that process was refined, and you can now go and talk to people who came in on the tail end, and they would say, I was there. I was maybe there 10 minutes, 15 minutes. I know I took my daughter for testing. She was one of the last schools, and and it was a larger school. It was a middle school. So from the time I arrived, standing in line, getting my paperwork and testing and leaving was just maybe 20 minutes. And so the process has been refined. We had noticed that there was some confusion amongst our parents showing up, unfortunately, but we've managed to sort that out and streamline that position. So when I spoke to MDL about the testing, as I said, during the original first couple of people, there were extended lines, and I will admit that I do make apologies for that. But as the testing regime went on and we refined it and made it simpler, those wait times were vastly reduced, in some cases to a couple of minutes per child as they move through that. The pre-testing that we're going to do, as I said, will happen at the various locations. Thank you to the Department of Health for allowing Penner's Wharf, Bull's Head, Dockyard, and Pirot's post office to be used. We still have Bermuda College in there. And I also just found out this morning that we'll be adding another site, St. Paul Centennial Hall. So we will have multiple sites for our students and parents to use on Friday and Saturday and Sunday. So I am hoping that will help alleviate some of that time frame. Additionally, we'll be providing a link to all parents and staff that they can actually book times. And so people will be able to go on, similar to how the process works now, for when you got to book a time to go to Penner's or Dockyard. You'll be able to book a time slot and be able to get in. So I'm sure even with that process, there will be some issues that we have to deal with, but we're working very hard to ensure that the testing process goes as smoothly as possible and as least disruptive as possible.
Now, you did speak to the fact that it's a larger logistical problem for government dealing with multiple schools, multiple campuses, when it comes to providing the testing, and there's a greater cost to rapid antigen testing than there is to PCR testing, about 4 times the cost, I understand. But this expansion, is there this need for expansion? Is there not a risk, perhaps, of once more seeing 2 Bermudas when it comes to education and the ability to have in-person education, the ability to maintain in-person education? How can we change that when the private schools already have in place this system and we're still working a system out for the public schools?
Well, Gary, interesting that you mentioned that. As you would know, as we've discussed before, the guidelines for in-school learning are the same for public and private. There's no difference between them. And I can assure you that even with the antigen testing that the private schools have had, there are positives that have come up, and they have been subject to the same regulations and rules that anyone in the public school system is subject to. I think it's a bit unfair for persons to continuously think that there is this difference in how things are treated. We are treated exactly the same. In fact, we talk on an often basis, myself and with the private school heads, on how we can work towards, as I mentioned in the statement, to change the quarantine process, because as I have discussed with health in other jurisdictions, they have recognized that having a positive case inside of a classroom, because of the strict environments that we do keep, that the automatic quarantining of an entire class is a way that people are moving away from. And as we introduce more processes to keep our schools safe, such as regular screening and the introduction of antigen testing, that can have a difference on how that looks. So there isn't a difference on how schools are treated, whether they're public or private, when a positive test does come up. And we'll all of us will continue to collaborate and move forward to put in place what is best for our children. I think when because we do get the complaints of why do they still have to wear masks? Why can't they run around how they want and that sort of stuff in the school system? And I try to get people to understand that the more control that we have over their actions in school, the less chance it is for them to not be in school, and that is critical for us. But I will always reiterate that while we can control where our children are sitting in class, whether they're wearing the mask, when they get the mask breaks, to sanitizing their hands and social distancing and all of that, it is our children spend more time outside of school than they do in school. And my concern is what's happening when they're not inside of our schools, because that's going to have the major impact on what happens within the school system.
Can you expand on the
Gary?
quarantine?
Hi, Gary. We have those 3 questions for you. We're going to allow Sarah to come back and ask another question. And then if we have time, we'll allow you to come back again.
Thank you.
Thank you. Sarah, are you still there? Hi, welcome back.
Thanks, Dana.
We have time for 2 more questions, Sarah.
Okay, I can't see you for some reason.
We can see you, Sarah, and I can hear you.
Okay, yes, we can see you
Okay,
live.
that's good. I can see you now. Can you give any indication of how much it's going to cost to introduce these antigen tests, sticking on the subject of financing this?
At
Minimum
this time,
cost and what a maximum cost, say if you get the minimum standard, how much it might cost.
Sarah, I think I can leave that to you to calculate. It all really depends on what the landed cost is. And from my understanding, those landed costs can fluctuate, but we have approximately 4,600 students in our system and 900 staff members. So that's an average that is about 5,500 persons within our school system. And so you can calculate it out from there. So if you're talking about antigen testing once a week for everyone, that's 5,500. You're talking about twice a week, that's 11,000 per week. And so those costs can add up very, very quickly. But it is, we are very appreciative to the private sector donors that have approached and said, listen, we're willing to work with you moving this on. And so we're busy working on that. And so, they will be providing us with with those tests.
Okay, I guess just one more then. You've talked about, the behaviors of some children. Maybe they're not all following the safety regulations that you set out. I mean, you're a father, you know what it's like to control these young ones sometimes, especially some of the more young, the younger children, keep a mask on.
Interestingly, Sarah, what I keep hearing is the younger ones are more apt to follow the directions than the older ones.
Okay, well, let's just talk about children in general, and the challenge that's on the hands of these teachers to enforce these regulations. Are there any extra staff that can help to enforce this that have been deployed to these schools, or are these teachers literally juggling all these children trying to enforce these regulations?
Well, sir, there hasn't been any additional staff per se put on, but the feedback that we've gotten is that the children get it. The children understand, like, if we want to continue to be in school, this is the stuff we need to do. Of course, there are always going to be that child that you got to kind of follow up on more so than the rest. But, I take my direction from talking to not just teachers, but talking to students as well. And when I talk to my daughter, she says, yes, we sit in class, we have our mask on, we do the mask breaks, and so I'm confident that people get it. People get it within our school system. Our children get it. Our teachers get it, and everyone is doing what needs to be done to ensure that that the guidelines within schools are followed, so we can stay safe.
Thank you, Thank you, Sarah. We appreciate your participation today, and we're going to let Gary in for his final question before we close out the conference. Stand by, Minister. Gary, you're back. You're live. You have 2 last questions before we finish up today.
Thank you very much.
Sure.
And apologies for bringing that back up. Thank you, Minister. Thank you, Dana. So yes, final questions would be, with us potentially needing donors, there are donors there locally to provide for rapid antigen testing or other costs that may come about from testing schools. What about Public Health England? This is the system that England is using with its schools. Is there the potential of them supplying any rapid antigen testing for us? Have we asked?
Gary, I know that I do believe that England has supplied some antigen testing. I'm just not at this moment aware of exactly what that amount would be. We are always open to donors, and it's something that I can take on the advisement. But at the moment, we were just approached by private donors locally who said, "Hey, we want to help. This is the type of volume," and so we've just gone with those continuing conversations. As I said, we also approached health and said, "Hey, we want to put this in place, but here are some of the logistics." Health has come back and said, "Here are some of the logistics," and we're just working through those. As I said, it's and you know, I had this conversation with one of the private heads when I said, "Wow, you know, you guys be able to pull this together," but then I realized that you're dealing with all of your students in one campus. And we're dealing with 36 different campuses and pulling a system together that allows the results to be, for example, if we do this on a Sunday evening, you know, we're told, how will the results be? Will we bring them in centralized and then distribute them to the school? What about the student? What about the parents who, you know, and we hear this when we talk about remote learning, don't have access to electronic means or a reliable electronic means? How do we handle that? So those are the types of logistics that really do have to be worked out. As we focused the last couple of weeks on getting our children back, getting the students back in, and getting the saliva screening process up and running, this has been being worked on in parallel. But after we come back from the break, I can assure you that this will be something that we really start to make movement with, and hopefully get this integrated as soon as possible within our safety measures.
And just to return to something you said earlier, obviously it's public, it's been, government itself has said that West Pembroke has been impacted by a coronavirus exposure, but you also indicated that that some private schools and had been over this similar the last month. Are you able to tell us how many has that been in the last month? And are there any other public schools impacted by coronavirus exposure since we've been trying to get back to school?
Thus far, Gary, there has not been any report from health that there has been COVID exposures in any other public school. And in terms of the private schools, that would be something for them to announce themselves. Unfortunately, it really just depends on how you look at it. Remember, schools are not informed of who has tested positive. They're only told that there is a exposure, and then the Department of Health does a risk assessment, and then they come back and say, well, this group of students or this person needs to be quarantined as a result of the risk of that exposure. The only time that this information gets out is for whatever reason in the public school, our parents advertise it. They put it out there, and then they say, you know, it was my child that would, you know, that sort of thing. You don't see that in the private school necessarily. They get the exact, as I said, the process is exactly the same. They get the same letters. They get the same letters that the public school would get, and the same instructions that the public school would get. But there is a difference between, I don't know. People seem to, in one instance, they seem to be happy to announce to the world that this is what's happened to their child. In other instances, they say, thank you for the advice, public health. I will do what needs to be done to keep my child safe. And then they will come out of school and then go back into school, and the quarantine period is over. I just can't really answer it any more than that. But yes, there have been exposures, you know, since school began in all of the private schools, literally. And there has been this one at, as you said, West Pembroke for us so far. But I think we have to be realistic and understand that there will be exposures, but we have to do everything that we can to limit them, do the things that need to be done to limit them. And also, as I said, we're looking at the current policy around what happens when an exposure happens in a school.
And thank you.
Thank you, Minister. Thank you, Dana.
Today.
Sure.
Thank you very much. Minister, thank you very much. To the public,
Thank you,
thank
Dana.
you for tuning in. And that comes to the end of our press conference for today. Have a great day.
All righty. Thank you, Bermuda. Stay safe.